An extreme example of fear-mongering.
Strong words at City Hall. Things get heated as concern grows over proposed cuts to public health funding.
They're saying it's going to go down.
The city says those cuts to public health will amount to $1 billion over a decade. Today, a group of city officials called on the province to reverse the funding changes. City Hall reporter Lauren Pelly joins us from the public health office at Yonge and Dundas. And Lauren, things got tense today when a staff member from the provincial health ministry showed up at City Hall.
Well, it all started with a press conference featuring supporters of Toronto Public Health who were concerned about these funding cuts. There was also an uninvited guest from the Ministry of Health, the province, and there was finger pointing and accusations, and it was all underpinned by growing concern that the city's health could be at risk.
Torontonians will die.
A dark prediction from Board of Health Chair Joe Cressy.
With no notice, no warning, and no consultation, the province shared the news that they would be cutting $1 billion over the next 10 years from Toronto Public Health, effective immediately.
I urge you, Mr. Ford, to meet and listen with regular civilians like myself who value human life so you can avoid having blood on your hands.
A few years ago, Priya Amin was treated for tuberculosis with the support of public health workers.
While I have fully recovered, there have been days where I have feared that the disease would come back, but at the same time found peace in knowing that if it did, I would be in good hands with public health.
City officials worry the cuts could limit the unit's ability to prevent the spread of infectious diseases or run other programs like restaurant inspections, vaccination services, or meals in schools. In a statement, Health Minister Christine Elliott accused the city of fear-mongering and said Cressy is making misleading accusations.
You would follow up with us to tell us when we would.
A member of her staff also showed up to his press conference.
So are you not prepared to share with the media the numbers that you publicly shared with 35 medical officers of health and 35 board chairs?
Again, it's our priority to engage directly with municipalities. There's obviously a disagreement in those numbers, and we've reached out to try and reconcile those to understand how they got to theirs and how they're different to how we got to ours. But again, those are direct conversations. It's not something we want to do through media. But
What
no,
numbers
thank
are
you.
you saying are inaccurate, though?
Thanks very much. We're happy to answer any further questions.
Thank you.
What numbers are inaccurate, though?
Why don't you just answer the question?
Like, is this wrong? What's inaccurate here? Well, after that incident took place, I followed up with Elliott's office again, trying to get them to confirm their numbers. They finally did, and they told me that their analysis showed a $33 million change for Toronto Public Health this year. I should note that's around half of what the city's estimate was showing, but the province didn't tell me how they reached that number. Dwight?
Okay, Lauren, where does our mayor stand on all of this?
Well, Mayor John Tory has likened this to a targeted attack on the city. He's raised multiple concerns about the future of our public health programs. And I asked the province, why Toronto seems to be getting a different cost-sharing structure than other municipalities. It looks like the city is getting harder hit. And their response to me today is that a city of our size should be able to run Toronto Public Health efficiently. Dwight?
Thank you, Lauren.
Washed out roads and properties at risk as a state of emergency is declared in Bracebridge. I'm Makta Gebrselassie. I'll have more on that coming up.
A man is dead after being hit by a car in Mississauga. It happened around 6 this morning at Huron, Ontario and Eglinton. Investigators are trying to determine exactly where the man was when he was hit. The driver remained at the scene. Police are appealing for anyone who saw what happened or has dash cam video to contact them. And the man is dead after a fire in a home in Rossensville's village. As Linda Ward tells us, it's believed more than a dozen people were living in the house.
Firefighters arrived at this home around 10:30 last night to find heavy smoke and flames coming from the basement apartment here. You can see through those windows completely burnt out, the glass shattered. That's where firefighters found the body of a man. Now, Deputy Fire Chief Jim Jessup was just on scene and he toured this home, which he called a firefighter's nightmare.
Certainly, the conditions the crews met last night, just having been in myself, multiple rooms throughout the building, very narrow and cramped quarters, very, very difficult to navigate, and very evidence of a very hot and deep-seated fire.
He stopped short of calling this a rooming house and doesn't know exactly how many people were living here, but he says numerous residents have been displaced. Do you have any idea how many occupants there were?
I've heard numbers of anywhere from 12 to 14. So certainly there were a number of rooms throughout the building, a number of apartments, and again, the occupancy classification will absolutely be determined and form part of our investigation.
Those investigators will also look into fire code compliance and whether any charges are to be laid here. Also, whether there were working smoke detectors inside the home. We know residents were alerted to this fire by a passerby who noticed smoke and flames and banged on the door. He had to be treated for smoke inhalation in hospital. In the meantime, the residents of this home have been placed in alternate accommodations. One man returned to the scene here today. He was too distraught to speak. It's unclear when or if they'll be able to return home. Linda Ward, CBC News, Toronto.
The cottage country community of Bracebridge has declared a state of emergency because of this, what you're looking at, flooding. The mayor tweeted this video of the raging Muskoka River. It runs right through the middle of town. Some roads around town are already washed out. Rapid snowmelt followed by heavy rainfall over the last few days have caused the water levels on the river and in local lakes to rise. Officials are warning residents who live in low-lying areas to be careful. Matt Nagabaselassie has more now from Bracebridge.
Yeah, it started to just be on the edge here.
Yeah. Jody Taylor started noticing the water level rising about 5 days ago. Now it's creeping up to the home she lives in.
I'm getting concerned because you don't know when the dams may break. Here, Huntsville, they need to get this water under control. Otherwise, it's going to be even more of a disaster.
Several roads have been washed out, properties are at risk, and the mayor of Bracebridge has declared a state of emergency. He took us on a tour of one of the flooded areas.
There's a parking lot for cars over there that's gone, a beach over here that right now is underwater, picnic areas. This whole bay is severely flooded.
Gives you a clear idea of just how high the water is, especially that railing there. People should be walking along that boardwalk. No chance of that today.
No chance of that today.
The last time the area declared a state of emergency due to flooding was in 2013. This time around, he worries the flooding could last longer.
You know, probably a couple of hundred properties right now that we're really concerned about. And so this afternoon, we've got first responders out, OPP and fire, going door to door and checking on people and encouraging them to leave certain areas because we don't believe it's safe for them to be there any longer.
For now, Taylor is staying put.
I'll stay here till we have to leave, which hopefully won't be soon.
Things could get worse here. Environment Canada is calling for more rain in the coming days. Magda Gebrselassie, CBC News, Bracebridge.
It is a beautiful part of our province. Not looking so good on the water up there, Colette.
No, it certainly isn't, Dwight. Yeah, there's a few things kind of going on here. Let me take a trip with you and just show you. Here we are, Toronto. For those of you who've not been to this beautiful part of the province, up past Barrie to the north, Bracebridge. It's not just Bracebridge, though. Huntsville, those areas, all vulnerable now because it's Lake Muskoka. It's also the Muskoka River, Black River. All of these, seeing that snow melt, Dwight was mentioning earlier, very rapid snow melt when we had some of those mild temperatures. But then you're kind of adding insult to injury when we've had some of the rain we've had just in the last 24 hours. Did you see what went through that area? I'm not saying this is the problem. I'm saying it contributes to it and why now we're sort of at the point where we're at because of all the snow, then the rapid melt, and now adding significant rain, or we just did. So the next question becomes, what's coming next? What are they going to have to deal with weather-wise as they're trying to deal with these flooding concerns and very high water levels? So a look at our satellite radar imagery shows you that things are looking pretty good at the moment, and it is going to be a quiet night tonight into tomorrow. Problems come, though, tomorrow night into Friday. That's when we're going to see the system. Much of the rain seems to at first anyway, stay to the south, but then that's going to start to rotate a little bit further north, and we'll see some of these rains pushing in. It looks like at this point, when I'm looking at some of our model projections of how much rain, you know, it's more like 15 to 25 millimeters, but again, that's just adding to the problems that we're already seeing there. The low-lying areas are one of the parts that are getting hit the hardest here, and as bad as it looks in Bracebridge, it's actually some of the rural areas just outside really seeing what's happening, and it's going to be a risk for them as this system comes in. Not only do we have this on Friday, but we have yet another one that's going to come through at the end of the weekend. So we can take a breather for right now for the GTA, and overnight tonight in Bracebridge as well. We're generally looking at quiet conditions. Clear skies here with 1 degree for the overnight low. In fact, we'll probably see some of us bottoming out there at the freezing mark. And then tomorrow afternoon, it's actually going to be a really pleasant day. Lots of sunshine. Late day will the clouds, and that next system will move in overnight tomorrow night. So we'll see that sunshine and a high of 16 degrees with those winds turning around towards the south. It was a nice day today as well, but those winds from the north just a little bit on the cool side, Dwight.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
And it's not only Bracebridge on the water. Parts of New Brunswick and Quebec are getting hit hard. In Gatineau, everyone helping to fill sandbags today, including the Prime Minister and his wife. We'll have more on that coming up. Plus, I'll speak with a flooding expert about why this is happening and how governments can help.
Monitoring, recording.
And we just had some cuts on those.
Yeah, and it's not the time to be doing that.
That's coming up for you at 6:30. We have to talk about it, folks. Many Leaf fans probably spent today thinking about what could have been.
Myers can't come up with a puck here. Sean Corelli gets some open ice, takes a shot, he scores!
Those faces say it all. Another Game 7 against Boston, another loss for our Leafs. And another season passes without the cup. It's been 15 years since the team even made it out of the first round of the playoffs. A familiar place for fans, but that didn't make it any easier to take.
This is the third time this has happened in 6 years. Like, it just gets so frustrating after a while.
I'm disappointed. I don't know, I'm at a loss for words.
We tried, we gave it our best effort. Yeah, I don't know.
It sucks, it's disappointing.
Yeah, exactly. The team will hold an end-of-season news conference in the days ahead.
We're a way more complete team this year. We have the defensiveness of Serge Ibaka, Kawhi, Marc Gasol. We can defend anybody in the NBA.
That's what we've been doing all season long, and I expect nothing less but the highest.
Here's something to make you feel a little better, Leaf fans. There's plenty of room on the Raptors bandwagon. The Raps beat up on the Magic last night to take their best-of-7 series 4-1. They move on to play the Philadelphia 76ers. That series will get underway on Saturday.
It's got this 90-degree drop into an underwater tunnel, which is the most amazing thrill. And you actually hang over the summit for 3 seconds, staring at that drop before you release, and you're going from 0 to 130 kilometers an hour. It's wild.
And that's a good thing. It's the tallest, longest, and fastest dive coaster in the world. It's about to open to the public at Canada's Wonderland. Our own Talia Ricci got up the nerves to ride it. You don't want to miss this. It's coming up a little later in the show. Weed-infused drinks are coming, and today a new alliance was unveiled to push for changes to proposed labeling rules governing those drinks.
So what we have here is a mock-up of a compliant label that would be used for a lager beer. As you can see on here, it has all of the elements that are required under the current regulations, not making it very attractive.
The Cannabis Beverage Producers Alliance says branding and packaging rules for cannabis-infused drinks are too strict compared to the rules for alcohol. The Alliance also wants the ability to produce pot-based drinks in the same facilities where non-cannabis beverages are made. Under Health Canada's proposed rules for edibles, pot-infused drinks, and food must be made in separate facilities. BC's top doctor is calling on the province to decriminalize illicit drugs for personal use, saying the overdose crisis is a public health concern, not a criminal justice issue.
There are alternatives to criminal charges for people. So this could be administrative charges, this could be connection with social services.
Dr. Bonnie Henry is hoping decriminalizing drugs will be a way to stem the province's overdose crisis. She says criminal laws contribute to the feelings of shame for people with addictions, and that shame stops them from seeking treatment. Henry says decriminalization would also allow police to steer people to the support they need. And voters in Prince Edward Island have elected their first minority government in more than 130 years.
Welcome to a new day in Prince Edward Island.
PEI's Progressive Conservative Party won the most seats, but the Green Party becomes the official opposition for the first time anywhere in Canada. The Liberals were seeking a fourth term, but have now been relegated to third-party status. The election results have Canada's smallest province joining a larger trend right across the country. 7 of Canada's 13 provinces and territories will now have Conservative governments.
Parents at a Toronto elementary school are concerned after a wrench flew from the top of this construction site and landed somewhere in this schoolyard behind me. I'm Greg Ross. Fortunately, nobody was hurt, but coming up, we speak with a concerned father who wants developers to do more to ensure the safety of his children.
You've got a projectile coming at off a bungee cord from 23 stories up onto a playground that is way too close to this building, and a kid could have been hurt seriously or killed.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
In Sri Lanka, mass burials are now taking place after the series of deadly attacks. 359 people are confirmed dead from the Easter Sunday massacres. Our Susan Ormiston is in Sri Lanka.
This is St. Sebastian's Church in Ngumbu, Sri Lanka. We can't take you inside or show you because they're doing a lot of forensic work inside there now. A suicide bomber murdered people right here on Sunday morning. There are so many funerals now, they're stacking up against each other as one procession leaves a cemetery, another arrives to bury their loved ones. The Defense Department acknowledged today that there were gaps in communication about warnings as early as the beginning of April that churches may be targeted. The Indian intelligence may have passed on information as recently as last Saturday, but that information was not well communicated, and the government is working to patch those holes now. The Prime Minister says he's going to sweep clean the top ranks of police and the Defense Department as he expresses his extreme regret and sorrow over what happened here. We're also learning a little bit more details about the 9 suicide bombers, 8 men and 1 woman, all Sri Lankans. The Defense Department saying that they were educated from middle class or upper middle class backgrounds, and some had lived or studied abroad, including one who was a student in Britain. Tomorrow, more funerals, more grief as the country is appealing for 2 things: help with intelligence to piece together what's happening here, and also prayers for its people. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Negumbo, Sri Lanka.
Catholics and Protestants came together in Northern Ireland today for the funeral of Levi McKee, the first journalist killed in the region in almost 20 years. Leaders from across Northern Ireland's political divide sat side by side with British Prime Minister Theresa May as hundreds of mourners celebrated the life of the 29-year-old journalist. McKee's death shocked people across the UK and sparked united calls to end religious violence. She was shot and killed last week while covering a riot alongside police in Londonderry, also known as Derry. An IRA splinter group claimed responsibility for the incident, saying she was not the intended target. The Toronto man who murdered, dismembered, and then threw Melissa Cooper's remains in the trash has been sentenced to life in prison. The 30-year-old woman was last seen on this security video getting into an elevator with Ian Ohab 3 years ago. Some of her remains were found dumped in the trash behind a butcher shop soon after. Ohab initially said she had died of a drug overdose in his apartment, and in a panic, he dismembered and scattered her body. But the court heard today that Ohab beat and murdered the 30-year-old shortly after she entered his apartment, and dismembering her body was a calculated move to conceal how she was killed. Because of that, Ohab will serve at least 22 years before he can apply for parole. A number of Cooper's family and friends say that is not enough.
I don't think he got enough. Like, he still gets to breathe and he gets to laugh and be with his family if he wants, have visits, and my friend doesn't get that anymore.
I don't think 22 years was just enough. It should have been 25. I want him to suffer, just as he made my best friend and her family, especially her mom and dad and her brothers. I hope that at every parole hearing he is denied parole, because he does not deserve to be in and about other normal people, because he'll just do it again.
I hope he never gets out. Hopefully people in, the right minds, when he ever gets up against parole board, looks at him and sees the real person that's in there. I mean, it's unfortunate watching his demeanor in court, to sit there and go through a court case like the way he did. There's no remorse in his voice for anything he did. Hopefully the animal just stays inside, like, my brother-in-law said in the past. That's what he is. He's just an animal. He's a predator.
The judge also cited Ohab's 4 prior convictions of violence against women during sentencing today. A new study says Alberta is home to a disproportionate number of extremists. The draft report from the study, prepared by an Edmonton-based anti-violence organization, says extreme views are being fueled by social media right across the ideological spectrum. Rafi Bouchakanian has the details.
The number of participants has been small, but over the last few months there have been a few anti-immigration protests across the city of Edmonton. Those keeping watch over hateful movements say they're not surprised by the results of a study that says extremism is on the rise in Alberta.
So I experienced somebody sending me a picture of my home. I've also experienced some targeted harassment online. We've known other people who've participated in counter protests who have had to leave their homes for a few weeks because their homes have been targeted.
The Organization for Prevention of Violence received a grant from Ottawa to conduct its work. It interviewed hundreds of police officers, members of communities affected by extremist violence, as well as former extremists who write this paper. It says that a vast number of different ideologies are available online for anyone with a warped worldview to go and take a look. These ideologies range from Islamic radicalism to white power and anti-immigration groups. The paper notes that haven't had this kind of popularity since the heyday of the Ku Klux Klan in Alberta in the 1930s.
It's been a game changer. What's happening online right now when it comes to violent extremism, when it comes to terrorism, when it comes to the ability of extremist communities to establish themselves, for individuals to, in a more anonymous and safe environment, to explore these ideologies and communities and find one that fits for them.
The OPV says communities affected by extremist violence need to be brought in to come up with grassroots solutions to the problem. It plans on releasing its final paper in mid-May. Rafi Bujikani on CBC News, Edmonton.
A freight train carrying some hazardous material has derailed just north of Montreal. CN Rail says 13 cars left the tracks, but officials say there's been no leakage, no injuries, and currently it does not pose a danger to the public. The cause of the derailment isn't known. Damage to the tracks is affecting some Via Rail service in the area to and from Montreal. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
If you've evacuated before, it's probably the same circumstances that would make you consider evacuating again this year.
New Brunswickers living in flood zones are being given until 7 o'clock local time to get out of their homes. That's when parts of the Trans-Canada Highway are being closed. Water levels in the St. John River in Fredericton hit their peak last night, surpassing 2018 levels. And while the water began to recede today, the relief is only temporary. More rain is in the forecast, and officials warn the flooding will get worse for communities to the south, all the way down to St. John. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had a first-hand look at flooding in Gatineau, Quebec today. It's one of the worst-hit communities along the Ottawa River.
With climate change, we're going to see more and more of these extreme weather events more regularly. It means we have to think about adaptation and mitigation and how we're going to move forward together.
Trudeau met with volunteer workers at the evacuation center, thanking them for their hard work. He and his wife, Sophie, also helped soldiers pack sandbags. Dozens of communities in Quebec, Ontario, and New Brunswick are dealing with flooding. Rain in Quebec has thousands of people on high alert. Officials say water levels in some areas are dropping, but in others, they still haven't reached their peak. Olivia Stefanovich shows us now how some residents in the flood zone are getting special support.
The Ottawa River is overflowing in Constance Bay, Ontario, into this yard and threatening properties such as this one. Take a look at this house. There's a wall of sandbags protecting it for now, but thousands more are needed as water levels rise.
You know, I was feeling not too bad, but now with the new predicted numbers and how much with the rain we got and how much the water's come up, and I don't have any more sandbags right now. Yeah, I'm getting a little bit nervous.
Help is coming by way of Team Rubicon. They're a group of volunteers made up of first responders and veterans who've been deployed to places such as Haiti and Florida for hurricanes and earthquakes. Now they're here in Constance Bay, Ontario, helping to coordinate the relief effort.
This is my fourth operation. I've traveled all around the world in my life and seen the lowest of low and what people do to survive, and to be able to give back to my local community and my local family, it's cathartic. It's what we love to do is to help others.
They say this is an extension of their service. Just as they have saved lives, they hope to save one property here at a time, but the battle isn't over. Team Rubicon plans to deploy resources to help as many people as they can. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Constance Bay, Ontario.
And the town of Bracebridge has declared a state of emergency due to, as you can see here, serious flooding. Water levels have risen on several waterways in the cottage country area, washing out a number of local roads. Earlier today, I spoke with a river specialist from the University of Toronto. He is an expert in river science. I started off by asking him why we've seen so much flooding.
Well, for sure, two reasons. This is the season of flooding. You get melting snow, heavy rainfall in April. Rivers respond to that. In some cases, in middle and northern parts of the provinces, you get ice jams as well, and that contributes to flooding. But the second reason is really because of climate change and the fact that we're seeing a higher frequency and larger magnitudes of floods occurring over the last several decades as a result of global warming.
Can we predict these things then? Like, what are some of the indicators that we're seeing?
Rainfall events in particular, especially in eastern North America. Last weekend we had 48 hours of solid soaking rain. Those kinds of events are going to become more frequent as you have more energy in the atmosphere, more rainfall on the Earth's frozen ground surface, and when it falls on melting snow, look out, the rivers do respond.
And it feels like it is getting worse. You spoke about climate change. It feels like it is getting worse with time. Are we correct with that?
It is in terms of real global warming and climate change, but you add on top of the fact that we are growing our cities and our towns and villages. Rivers are always popular places to build, both historically and contemporaneously, and as a result, that puts more people at risk. So we need to be better managers and better operators of the river valley systems in order to try to mitigate or reduce the risk.
I heard the Quebec Premier saying that maybe you shouldn't live here anymore, talking about actually moving people. Are these the kind of things we're going to have to think about as we plan?
For sure, Toronto had that experience with Hurricane Hazel in 1954. River valleys were great places to live when they're peaceful and quiet, but as soon as floods occur, it's quite damaging. So it's hard to tell someone who's lived there for 100 years, you've got to move. But as these events become more frequent, it's something that's going to happen, and Quebec has announced the program of actually purchasing homes or providing a term limit, a lifetime limit on the amount of compensation for flood damage to individual homes.
Is there anything we can do as individuals to help deal with this problem as we move forward?
Yeah, reducing flood risk, flood proofing your home. Some people have raised the foundations to get above flood limits, but it's kind of like chasing the rabbit. As climate changes, those flood levels may increase. Managing water within the watersheds, and if you're in the city like Toronto, you've got to be really careful of the effects of urban landscapes on the way water runs off the surface. And so we see increasing floods within the valley systems, and as long as we can maintain those as parklands and general access things, we reduce the risk of people being exposed to the effects of damaging floods.
I know you're not an expert on government policy, but is there something our governments can do then?
Monitoring, recording.
And we just had some cuts on those.
Yeah, right? And it's not the time to be doing that. It's the time to be more careful, collecting more data and modeling and better. And this means both at the plot or landscape scale, individual homes and flood risk mapping, right up to compensation programs that might help people move out of the highest risk zones as things get worse.
And it seems they are getting worse.
No question about it. It's more visible, it's more prominent, and we're going to have to really be careful on this over the next several decades.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much.
A wrench launched from a condo construction site 23 stories down and landed on a school playground last week. The incident is adding to a debate that's been going on for 2 years, whether a 35-story residential tower should be built so close to a school. Greg Ross joins us live now from John Fisher Public School. And Greg, luckily the playground was empty at the time, but the kids were in school.
That's right. This happened during school hours, Dwight. In fact, it was a young student who discovered the wrench on the playground. Now, it came from this high-rise building here behind me. It was launched off the top, and it landed just in the playground behind the school here. Again, during school hours. Fortunately, nobody was hurt, but parents here tell me they are very worried that the outcome here could have been far worse.
And a kid could have been hurt seriously or killed.
Ian Cooper has 2 kids that go to John Fisher Public School. He was shocked to learn last week that a 9.5-inch wrench flew from the top of this high-rise and landed on the school playground.
Parents were pretty freaked out by it. I mean, it came down from 23 stories, was flung as a projectile off a bungee cord.
A spokesperson for KG Group, the developer of the building, confirmed this happened on April 17th. In a statement, he said, "This isolated incident was thoroughly reviewed, and we have proactively taken enhanced safety measures to ensure this incident is not repeated." According to a report from KG Group sent to parents by the TDSB, a construction worker was climbing a ladder when the wrench was caught on a bungee cord barrier, causing it to fling over the side of the building.
The tools are supposed to be tethered when in use, especially near the edges, but somehow that didn't happen in this specific case.
The school had lost part of its playground when construction began in 2017. As a result of this incident, the school board is now going to restrict an even larger area.
We are now building a new fence along that part of the building, and we are going to be blocking off the playscape for the school where the wrench had fallen.
We're now at the point where our small playground is already being restricted, which is the right thing to do for the safety of the kids. But I guess the question is why the school has to yield to the developer.
For its part, the KG Group says it's also taking corrective and preventative measures, such as increasing frequency of safety and housekeeping inspections, installing safety meshes behind the double-stack safety fence to fully cover open areas, and expediting window installation. Parents say it's still not enough.
And one thing that they can do is think about when they're actually going to be constructing this and not do it while there are kids out there.
Cooper and other parents are also suggesting other changes as well, like not putting balconies on the side of the building that faces the school. Might be a little too late for that now, but they would also like to see KG Group reward their patients during this project by maybe making a donation to the school to help upgrade things here. They say that there's a lot of things that need to be fixed, and they say that they could use the help, Dwight.
That'd be a sign of goodwill. Thank you, Greg. The Ford government is looking at ending OHIP's limited coverage of emergency out-of-country medical costs. Right now, OHIP reimburses $200 a day for an unexpected hospital stay in another country, as well as a maximum of $400 a day if you are in an intensive care unit or surgical ward. The Ontario government is justifying the change by saying OHIP covers just 5% of a typical medical emergency, so buying travel insurance is already a necessity. The province pays just $9 million a year in emergency out-of-country medical claims. The financial turbulence continues for Boeing. The jet maker is dealing with a rare drop in earnings, and it has withdrawn its 2019 earnings forecast. This all comes as the company's 737 MAX airliners remain grounded because of safety concerns. Boeing stock has fallen 11% since one of the planes crashed in Ethiopia on March 10th. But for the year, the stock price remains up by about 15%. Boeing estimates it will spend $1 billion to fix the problems with its 737 MAX aircraft. There's a little good news for Canadians who are borrowing money. The Bank of Canada is holding its trend-setting interest rate steady at 1.75%.
Monetary policy needs to maintain a degree of accommodation sufficient to offset these various headwinds until the economic outlook improves.
Bank of Canada Governor Stephen Poloz says the Canadian economy has slowed more than expected recently. He blamed global trade uncertainty, low oil prices, a slowing housing market, and reduced government spending, especially in Ontario. In the policy statement that came with today's announcement, the bank removed any mention of the need for future rate increases. Many economists expect rate hikes will be on hold for the rest of this year. And as we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This market update is brought to you by SSQ Insurance, reminding you that stronger communities make every person stronger.
federal government's Semion building at Yonge and St. Clair is getting a $277 million energy-efficient makeover. The Canadian government is spending the money to make the 1950s building more energy efficient and accessible. Once renovations are done, the project will look something like, it's coming up there, making it the first federal carbon-neutral building in Canada. There it is. The building will use solar panels and geothermal systems for heating and cooling. Devices will also be installed to help visually impaired people navigate their way through the building with the use of an app. Renovations are expected to be finished by 2022. Carla, can we continue to talk about this flooding? It feels like it's the theme of today's show. We're seeing all this flooding, and even though 2013 was, 100 years of flooding?
Right, was supposed to be that marker, right? Like the worst you're going to see in 100 years, and it's only 2019. Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people are asking that, and what's going on here? But Bracebridge isn't the only place, where we're seeing this, and we can relate it to climate change, much like the expert you were talking to. The last 5 years we know have been the warmest we've had on record. So we have to kind of throw out the rule book when we look at our climatology or our records of what we have based on how old the Earth is. We only have records for a short period of time, and everything is changing. So the barometer is moving, and I don't mean the weather pun there. We really have to re-look at things, and we're going to be seeing more and more of this 100-year floods happening, though, in more of a 10-year period. All right, your weather headlines. I got to explain these to you. First of all, a little chilly tonight. We're still talking about the chance of the temperature even dropping below freezing, like Markham, you may be -1, but because of the clear skies, that does mean tomorrow morning a little chilly to start things off, but then it is going to be such a nice day Thursday that I'm assessing a 2-minute penalty. Do you know what that would be for? Yeah, 2 minutes for looking so good. Please tell me that you are old enough to remember what I'm referring to with Rocket Richard. So Thursday, just a gorgeous, gorgeous day there. And then incoming on Friday, we do have showers coming back into the forecast. Our current temperature is 13 degrees in Toronto, Oshawa at 11, a little cooler there. Peterborough, 8 degrees. A quiet night tonight, no active weather that we have to be concerned about. It's just as we go later on into the day tomorrow. So we have a lot of sunshine through the day, and that's why it's looking so good. But the rain comes in overnight Thursday into Friday, and then we're going to see that continuing through the day on Friday. It does push up in some of the areas we've been talking so much about today, and then we'll finally see it starting to move away as we head into the beginning of the weekend into Saturday. So overnight Friday, that will be pushing away. Overnight tonight, there's a look at these temperatures. Yes, mostly we're going to be around 1 or 0 for Oshawa, but Markham into the negative still. At least the winds will be a bit on the light side, so we're not talking so much about a wind chill for tomorrow morning. Tomorrow afternoon, what a glorious day. Looking at temperatures mostly in the mid-teens, might see the odd spike there going a little bit further into the upper teens. But it's Thursday night into Friday. Wet conditions come in. You'll want your umbrella for Friday. 15 degrees for the high. Now Saturday, we see a change in the air mass. So we've got some cooler air that's going to move in. Northwesterly breeze, breezy, 11, probably feeling a little chillier than that, but we will have sunshine and a dry day. That is the day of the weekend to do your outdoor stuff because Sunday is looking wet and a little bit on the cool side. Dwight.
Are you telling us we need to get the gray out with that Rocket Richard Grecian formula joke?
You got it. I knew you would get it. Yep, Grecian formula, 2 minutes.
I had a little help, but I did get it. Thanks, Colette.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Eventually, it got to a point where I was a little bit lonely and I was really craving some social interaction.
Working from home sounds nice, but how much of a toll does it take on your physical and mental health? We'll have that story for you coming up next. In our wired world, working from home has become more and more common, and it certainly sounds great. No commute, comfy clothes, and flexible hours. But there's a dark side to working at home, particularly for those who do it full time. As Diane Buckner tells us, the isolation may take a toll on your health.
All right, and look, certain layers are going to change. So here I'm going to change to a completely different drum groove right here.
Adam Simmons teaches a very 2019 type of music class, showing grade school students how to remix popular songs.
And now let's see what this sounds like.
Simmons' company, which employs other teachers as well, has a contract with the Toronto School Board. But when he started his business, he did most of his work at home and hated it.
I think it's really damaging for your mental health. It definitely was for mine. I felt very, very lonely. I was starting to get depressed.
It's a huge issue. It is a huge health issue, and it's an issue for the workplace as a result.
This human resources consultant says her firm's research shows isolation is a problem for 41% of employees surveyed.
It impacts mental health and the risk of depression, it impacts anxiety, it impacts people's personal well-being. It also impacts your physical health.
But the trend towards working outside the office, often alone, has been growing steadily. The most recent data from Statistics Canada says 2.5 million Canadians, more than 12% of the workforce, work at home, at least part of the time. And as remote work has grown, so have mental health costs, now at 30% of all disability claims. Research hasn't yet connected those two trends directly, but isolation is described as extreme most often by those who work at home.
When somebody is saying that something is extreme, it's hard to imagine that that's not seriously impacting their lives and their well-being.
Adam Simmons has now abandoned his home office. He now rents a space in a co-working facility.
The most severe punishment we give a person if they've committed the most heinous crime is we take them away from other people.
Like solitary confinement.
Yeah, that's the worst punishment we have.
Experts say the key to working alone and avoiding loneliness is staying connected.
How did that sound?
A reminder of the importance of maintaining a real social network. Diane Buckner, CBC News, Toronto.
I'm Talia Ricci, and it's been about 10 years since I've been on a ride. And for some reason today, I thought it would be a great idea to ride the world's tallest, longest, and fastest dive coaster. I'm not scared, I'm excited. Can you guys make sure we're strapped in properly?
There was the Behemoth, I rode that one, then Leviathan, and now there's the Yukon Striker. The newest addition to Canada's Wonderland is also a record setter when it comes to both size and speed. We sent our Talia Ritchie along for the ride's debut.
So when I was asked to do this assignment today, I thought, how tough could it be to ride a roller coaster? Thousands of kids will be riding this roller coaster this summer. But then people thanking me for volunteering to do this morning and telling me how brave I was really psyched me out.
It's got this 90-degree drop into an underwater tunnel, which is the most amazing thrill. But the coasters are floorless, and so you've got your legs dangling over open air, and you actually hang over the summit for 3 seconds, staring at that drop before you release, and you're going from 0 to 130 kilometers an hour.
How are you feeling?
Oh, nervous, but I'm excited at the same time.
I'm so ready to ride this crazy coaster.
Oh shoot, it looks like I'm not tall enough.
Is the longest dive coaster in the world. It is 1,105 meters long. It has the longest drop on a dive coaster in the world.
Hanging for that 3 seconds is probably my favorite part of the ride, although those inversions were pretty awesome too. It was definitely pretty intense, so I enjoyed it very much.
That's a very thorough review. Okay, any advice for me though?
If you're scared of heights, don't look down.
Keeping our lovely audience in mind, I actually strategically did not eat breakfast this morning. I'm not scared, I'm excited. Can you guys make sure we're strapped in properly? Yeah, we are. I'm floating. That was actually awesome. I loved it. So if any of that appealed to you, you can give it a whirl yourself when Canada's Wonderland opens to the public on May 3rd. Talia Ritchie, CBC News, Toronto.
Oh, to be a young, brave, intrepid reporter again.
She could have it. She
Thank
was
you.
a good person
Maybe
for that.
in my younger days, but I'm not going that. Good on you, Talia.
Survived.
What's up for tomorrow?
Well, we're going to survive, in fact, pretty nicely. We've got a nice night, overnight tonight, quiet conditions. We're going to see the temperatures a little cool. This is just a couple degrees below seasonal for this time of year, but with the clear skies, not surprising to have the temperature dropping down near freezing. Tomorrow afternoon, that's our gorgeous day. Looking at a lot of sunshine. The winds will be fairly light coming from the south, and our high temperatures in the mid-teens. Looks like we should be getting up there to about 16 degrees. So things looking really great through the day tomorrow. It's just tomorrow overnight as we go into Friday. That's going to be the next, the next batch
we'll
of
save
rain
the bad
showers.
news for later.
Yeah. Hey, tomorrow. We'll tell you about it again tomorrow.
After that. That's our show for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Now, you know, we have to leave with Talia. She took one for the team. She went on that Yukon Striker. We have to scream. We have to leave the show. Look at her in slow-mo, no less. Have a great night, everyone. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Let's enjoy some more of this ride. Look at her face.
That's fun.
With our Talia Ritchie.